I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio now by the Middle East policy analyst at the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies, Janatan Sayeh. Janatan, you were in the studio with me on Thursday and we were talking about when this might happen, when President Trump would decide to bomb Iran, to try and get rid of Ayatollah Khamenei. It's happened very quickly. Your thoughts this evening?
It certainly did, and I think it's a historic moment, really, both for Americans. This is a regime that has terrorized our troops throughout the world, but also as an Iranian, I must say, when I was active on the ground in 2009, and that was one of the major protest waves, and that was when President Obama was in D.C., no help came from Washington. And when I was listening to the president's remarks this morning, as he outlined that he was the only president that was going to send help to Iranians, that was a fact. He followed up on that. So really seeing Iranians rejoice inside the country, I do think he's definitely going to go down in history as the only president that's going to neutralize the real threat in the Middle East. So I think the biggest foreign policy win for any American president would be to see not only an Abraham Accords, but the Cyrus Accords trying to normalize the relations between Israel and Iran. It would be truly historic, and I think we're getting really close to that moment.
So there are people on American media today lamenting President Trump's warmongering and saying that, this is all about him, this is about him wanting the Nobel Peace Prize, whatever. What do you say to those people?
It's absolutely absurd, and you have to really look at the same people that were making such remarks were probably really concerned about the war in Gaza. But as soon as the issue switches to the mass killing of Iranians by their own regime, we saw 40,000 people dead in 48 hours, and nothing. There was no mention of that. So I do think with people with agendas, of course, want to politicize everything. I do think national policy issues ought to be a bipartisan matter because, when Iranians are opening fire at different personnel in the region, they're not going to ask if you're Republican or Democrat what your really, affiliation is. So, of course, it tends to be really a national security issue. And, of course, I think we need to see what's going to happen in the next few days. It's imperative for this campaign to really expand beyond just a bombing attack and enable the Iranians to really finish the job, and that's what the president was really focused on if you listen to the last 2-3 minutes of his 8-minute speech.
Yeah. Majid Nawaz, who is an expert on this area, probably one of the best in the world, was on just before, and he was saying that his understanding of President Trump is that he doesn't indiscriminately bomb countries unless he has a plan. We saw it with Maduro. He was speculating that the line of succession will already have been decided within Iran. How likely do you think that is? And if so, do you know who that might be? How many people within that regime already might be turned to be more pro-American, if that's one possibility?
So to address the first thing they mentioned about whether the president would indiscriminately bomb, that's not what we've seen, but more importantly, that's not what Iranians on the ground saw. So if you see the videos of what's happening inside Tehran and parts of the country, people were actually on the rooftops because they knew they are not the targets of this attack. And that's very important for us to realize. This is a targeted campaign against specific sites. Of course, part of them are ballistic and nuclear, but the other one are actually the repression forces that have killed Iranians. So that's important for us to know. So
just to dwell on that, so the civilians felt so safe that they weren't cowering in the basements. They had such faith that America will do this well, that they were on the roofs of their buildings to watch the bombs coming in. That's a remarkable statement.
I must admit, it went beyond just the roof. You saw people actually cheering on the street, dancing, playing music, as you heard fighter jets flying over. Similarly, actually, to the 12-day war, when Israelis were, again, taking out different targets of the Islamic Republic, you saw Iranians really drinking, cheering, and, this is something I covered as well, saying, as they strike, we dance, because not only are we not the target, we're working on a shared threat that is the Islamist regime in Tehran.
That is just remarkable. I interrupted you then, Janatan, because I just wanted to dwell on that. But back to my earlier point then about who may step in, who may take over.
So it is very challenging because the Supreme Leader had the former president in mind, probably as his successor, Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash mysteriously. We still don't know exactly what happened there. That was a couple of years ago at this point. So per the Islamic Republic constitutions, there is an assembly that is supposed to elect the Supreme Leader. I doubt they're going to be meeting publicly, given the campaign that's going on. I'm sure the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps wants to portray an image of calm. They might try to select somebody, at least symbolically, so at least portrays an image that, yes, the regime is still intact. We don't know who's going to be a successor. We don't even know if there's going to be a replacement for the supreme leader, because again, the Islamic Republic is an apparatus that is not necessarily reliant on one individual, and that's what's so terrifying about the regime itself. It's not like Maduro or Saddam Hussein. The system might stay in place, so we need to keep an eye out for the different pillars that might be still continuing, and not really focus too much about one person or one leadership.
And how likely is it that there will be other people within the country who want to be involved politically, who have a more Western outlook? How easy would it be for those people to start to help run the country?
Well, we would have to see systemic change, because the people that are in charge right now by no means find America to be friendly. Eventually, these are people that essentially started the Islamic Revolution with death to America. So you're not really going to get behavior change from those people. We talk about systemic change. That's what Iranians on the ground want. They want to really revolutionize. They see this as a pivotal moment, no way out but through. And I can tell you, the masses of Iranians that are taking to the streets right now, all of them want better relations with not just America, but with the West. They want to be integrated in the international community, of course. They're tired of this isolation imposed on them by a theocracy. So it is looking very prosperous. It comes down to this campaign really being able to get rid of the repression apparatus that would allow the civil society that's been suffocating to breathe.
And that hasn't been possible really in other Middle Eastern countries. That didn't happen with Iraq. It hasn't happened with Afghanistan. Those countries are... Maybe Iraq may be slightly different, but Afghanistan is in no better shape now than it was when America went in 20 odd years ago. How faithful, how much trust can we have and faith in this government that it's going to be different this time around? And if so, who do we credit for that?
It is fundamentally different, of course. I think if you're going to credit one person, it would have to come down to the Crown Prince that's been leading this revolution, has been leading this movement for years now. But I do remember discussing this with you priorly when we were here. We were talking the comparison between Iraq or Afghanistan versus Iran. Yeah. Of course, a population that is anti-Islamist, very educated, and the most important pillar there, Iranians want a democracy. That's what they've been thriving to get, and they're familiar with the mechanisms in place that have democratic features such as elections, checks and balances. So when you look at all the key features of what would lead to democracy, you do see it in Iran right now, but you did not see it in Iraq or Afghanistan in the 90s. So context is different, leadership is different, society is different, but more importantly, we're living at a different time now.
We are looking at pictures here live of Jerusalem, and I'm on air all night tonight, as you may know, until 6 o'clock UK time tomorrow morning. Tehran has this really strange time difference of 3.5 hours different ahead of the UK, so that's 8.5 hours ahead of here. What pictures do you think, Janatan, may emerge as the sun starts to come up over Iran tomorrow? I
can tell you, when the sun was setting, people were dancing on the street. We saw them cheering, men, women, young people coming together, rejoicing, fireworks going to place. I mean, this is a population that has not been able to rejoice for about 50 years. So the harmony in everyone's hearts is just really not comparable to any other time. As to what happens tomorrow, I think the president and the opposition leader were both very clear that right now the bombing campaign has not stopped. So people need to be in shelter. When it is time for them to really go out, and as the president noted, to take over their government, it is theirs to take. And that was really, I think that resonated with everyone. That should be the real focus. Probably it's going to take us a few days, given the extent of of course, the military built up by the Islamic Republic. But ultimately, I think we'll definitely get there. It's just going to take some time.
We're looking at some pictures here. These are the pictures that you were referencing about music on the streets, people dancing around, no sign of head coverings for women from some of the pictures that I've seen today. It genuinely is jubilation. It's very hard for us to relate to in the West of what this occasion must feel like for people there.
It does. And you know, the way to look at it is, once you have freedom and you're deprived of it, it hits much differently than normally, because this is a population that, you know, during my father's generation, of course, and during our parents' generation, under the Shah, These conditions did not exist. You know, it was a prosperous country. We had social freedoms. And, you know, just to look at the youth right now in my hometown of Tehran, really waving the flags of the pre-Islamic Republic era, that really signals that we're looking at our past as a springboard for the future. But of course, we cannot turn the clock, you know, back in time. But that said, we can learn from it and move on. And I think that's what the youth are really moving towards.
Yeah, and this is very much a population that wants to look forward and move forward, isn't it? And they look like they're poised on the edge of a new beginning, and they are so ready for it, aren't they?
We all are, absolutely. When I talk to folks on the ground, it is a revolutionary moment, and it feels like the 2,500 years of civilization of ancient Iranian heritage is actually making a comeback.
Yeah. Well, Janatan, Sayeh, who thought you'd be back in the studio with me so soon? So thank you, and I'm glad to see you smiling this evening.